You're now listening to All Hog Sports, covering all Arkansas Razorback sports, such as football, basketball, baseball, and much more. Now, here's your host for today's show, Sam Stimson.
The Arkansas Razorbacks return to play Chad Morris in Week 3 against the Auburn Tigers. But first, if you like what you're hearing today, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at AllHogSportsPod. And make sure to follow me at allhogsports.com as well. And please share this podcast, and please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Now, kicking it off with some game day information, Arkansas is 1-1, and they are going to be playing at the Auburn Tigers, who are also 1-1. And the big thing is there's a possible tropical storm/hurricane possibly move the game to a neutral site or to later week. I doubt they'll do a later week, though, because of COVID. They want to keep that open week in case of severe outbreak. However, I think it's a chance that they could move the game to a neutral site or to Fayetteville, so that's something to monitor throughout the week. However, regardless of that, it is supposed to rain a ton, and if you know anything about rainy games, there's usually not as lot of passing because it's harder to catch the ball, so there'll be a lot of running. In my opinion, Arkansas has the advantage on the running game. However, I will talk about that in today's episode, and the game is at 3 p.m. on SEC Network. Basically, the new Arkansas Razorbacks versus the struggling Auburn Tigers. They did look good against that Georgia game. However, Arkansas is coming off a great win against Mississippi State. In Week 1, they lost to Georgia. However, the offense is looking a little bit better for the Razorbacks, averaging 207.5 yards per game on passing. Now, I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but you got to keep in mind for both of these stats for Auburn and Arkansas, they played against Georgia, which had the number 1 FBS defense. So when you look at the stats and think, oh, this stat's not high, this stat's too low, it's really not a true representation because of the fact of how good Georgia is. And that's something we'll see throughout the season as they keep playing really good teams. Felipe Franks, though, looking pretty good. This season, he's 36 out of 64 for 412 yards and 2 interceptions, averaging 6.2 yards per pass. And he had a really good game against Mississippi State. He had a completion percentage in the 70s, 21 out of 26 on that game, and he didn't throw any picks and had 2 touchdown passes. So he looked rough against Georgia. However, when you played Mississippi State, a little worse at defense, it was easier for him to succeed. And obviously, Auburn does not have the same defense, so I think Franks will be able to play pretty good. But I've been saying this a lot on this podcast and just to other Arkansas fans, is Franks has to get time in the pocket, because when he starts scrambling and he's getting pressured by the defense, he sometimes doesn't know what to do, so he throws into bad situations, which result in picks. And actually, on this Mississippi State game, this happened multiple times because their offensive line is better than it was last year. However, it's not really at a very, very good point. So he's going to have to scramble a lot, but as long as he can scramble and make a smart decision to throw the ball away or run it, which he did a ton on Saturday's game against Mississippi State, which was really good, we'll be fine. And I expect him to continue that trend of making smart decisions this week against Auburn. Arkansas has not been able to establish any run game so far, though, averaging 70 rushing yards per game, 2.2 yards per carry each game. And Rakeem Boyd has been injured since last week. He suffered an undisclosed injury against Mississippi State. It's kind of been up in the air if he is going to play or not, but I'll talk about that more in the brand new injury report segment. I added that segment in because we've gotten to that point of the season where each game we're going to have a few key guys that will be possibly not playing because of injuries, so I want to talk about those. But Traylon Smith has actually been stepping up big time. He has 20 carries for 86 yards, and I know that may not seem like a lot, but we've lost a lot of rushing yards on stuff like double reverses with TJ Hammonds, which we better not see any of this weekend, or else I'm going to go crazy, because any trick play with TJ Hammonds has not worked yet, and I don't know why it's going to work against Auburn. Especially against a pretty good SEC defense, it's just not going to work out at all. But the receiving core is actually looking pretty good. De'Vion Warren, our leading wide receiver, with 5 catches for 123 yards and a touchdown. He looked really good against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. He had a touchdown catch that was like 12 yards, I think. And then he had a 49-yard catch from Franks. And Franks has at least one play of both of these games that is pretty explosive. So I'd expect one of these wide receivers, either Warren, Burks, Woods, or Knox, to get some 50-yard game that will definitely shift a lot of momentum and hopefully result in a scoring drive from the Razorbacks. But tight end Hudson Henry actually played really good against Mississippi State. He had a touchdown catch and overall looked pretty good on the blocking side. And he's splitting tight end snaps with the other tight end, Blake Kern, who is more of a run blocker than he is a pass catcher. However, he got his first catch against Georgia, so it'll be interesting to see if he's going to get involved in the passing game. But Arkansas obviously is going to have to keep up this trend of having better offense under Browse if they want to beat Auburn, because Auburn doesn't have a great defense, but it's not bad. It's probably one of the better ones in the SEC. So Franks definitely has to put points on the board because you got to win. But that Arkansas defense is looking stellar, giving up 289.5 yards per game. And they defeated the air raid, which tore up LSU. We played the air raid, and the Mississippi State quarterback KJ Costello was 43 out of 59 for 300 yards and 1 touchdown. But we picked him off 3 times. That's where the Razorbacks really defended well against the air raid, is we forced a lot of turnovers in the air. Basically, all Arkansas did was rush 3 and drop 8, and it worked to defend the air raid as Mississippi State struggled to move down the field and score touchdowns. So I would expect those trends to keep moving on defense. However, we're playing a whole different defensive system, which I'm sure a few of the players may know, as the Auburn offense is based off of Chad Morris. Now, I don't know if Chad Morris or Gus Malzahn is calling plays, but at the beginning of the season, Chad Morris was. So assuming he is, I'm sure Arkansas defense will play well. And the reason that they're going to play well is, if you don't remember, the last time that Barry Odom played a Chad Morris offense was 2018. It was a dark day for Razorback fans. Mizzou winning 38-0. Barry Odom putting a shutout on the Arkansas offense. So Odom definitely knows how to read that offense, and I wouldn't doubt him one bit. Odom, an incredible coach. But a few guys that will make an impact for Arkansas is safety Joe Faucha. He stepped up big with 2 interceptions off of KJ, and both of them were really big turning points for the Arkansas secondary and momentum. Also, safety Jalen Catalan, he had 22 tackles in these last 2 weeks. The redshirt freshman, who was a highly touted recruit out of high school, recruited under Chad Morris, and is one of the best players I have seen under the Razorbacks in a while. Can't wait to see how he develops in the next few years. However, as of right now, he's going to have a big impact on this game, along with a couple guys like cornerback Greg Brooks Jr. with a pick 6 against Mississippi State. And another guy who's not getting enough credit is cornerback Hudson Clark. He went in for the injured Monteric Brown, which I'll talk about later. But he stepped up big. He allowed no completions on 1 target. The former walk-on, and he's definitely named to watch this week if we have a guy or 2 go down or the depth just starts getting tired, which shows you that Barry Odom is working with this low-depth roster. The defense obviously doesn't have a lot of depth, and we saw that against Georgia. However, against Mississippi State, we still had basically the same depth, only lost a few guys, and we lost 1 guy due to an opt-out. But overall, Barry Odom has worked this Arkansas defense super well with the low depth that he has. Now, the run defense has also looked really good this season for the Razorbacks, allowing 104 yards on the rushing. And overall, we have a lot of really good linebackers and defensive linemen that have been able to do this. Linebacker bumper pool with a total of 31 tackles on the season, 20 of those being in the Mississippi State game. He's a guy who's stepped up big, along with linebacker Grant Morgan, one of the captains. He has 28 tackles on the season. Those guys have been all over the field on receiving and rushing plays, getting tackles. So they've definitely contributed to the overall good run defense. And another guy who stepped up big is defensive line Zach Williams. He stepped in for the injured players. I'll get to that later. But he had 1 sack last week, and he's overall a really good player. He put a ton of pressure on the Mississippi State offensive line, which really allowed Arkansas to play good defense because they got to the quarterback fast enough that Mississippi State had to throw the ball, so that Arkansas was able to capitalize off of turnovers and turnover run downs, and overall, just defense looked a lot better, and Zach Williams definitely had a big part into that. Special teams looked a lot better against Mississippi State. However, I think they have a little bit of ways to go, though, until we really see how good this special teams coach is, Scott Fountain. A.J. Reed has not had a chance to kick a field goal against Mississippi State, but he is 4 for 4 on all kicks this year. And overall, he's looked pretty good. 4 for 4 on PATs, and he's had one extra field goal. My bad there. But he's looked pretty good. He was a really good kicker out of Duke. So if we get to a situation where we have to kick to win the game, I think it's possible that A.J. Reed comes out and kicks a winning kick. I think Arkansas, though, finally has their starting punter in George Carrington. He was competing for Sam Loy, and they've been listed at or for the depth chart. Carrington taking 7 out of the 8 punts against Mississippi State. He averaged 43 yards a punt on that. I talked about that more in our recap episode. If you haven't listened to that, I would listen to that after this episode. However, he has really good punts. They go a pretty good distance. He has really good hang time, which allows our special teams unit to get down the field and make a tackle against Mississippi State, which overall lets Arkansas play well-rounded special teams because they're going to be making easier tackles and things like that. But kick return, punt return is definitely a thing that the Razorbacks have to work on against Auburn. Now, the Auburn Tigers are number 13 in the AP Top 25. However, they had their struggles against Georgia just like we did. They lost 27-6. However, they beat number 23 Kentucky at the time. Overall on offense, the Chad Morris offense kind of looks a little weird. I wouldn't say they're lost yet. It's probably too early to tell because they played Georgia and they couldn't get anything going. But in the second half against Kentucky, the offense looked pretty well. But it's that Chad Morris offense, and the inner Razorback fan in me wants to say that it's horrible, and I think it's not going to work for him. But I would say they looked a little lost right now. I don't know really how to say it perfectly, but the offense does not look good for the Auburn Tigers. Bo Nix has 205 passing yards per game, and right now on the season he's 27 out of 67 with 410 yards, and he also has an interception averaging 6.1 yards per attempt, and overall he just doesn't look that good in the Chad Morris offense. He doesn't look like he's the good fit in that system at all, and who is at this point, really? Chad Morris is not a great coach at all, and I don't think he's going to lead this position unit to a ton of success. Bo Nix already showing a lot of struggles with those play calls from Chad Morris. Struggled a ton against Georgia, 51% completion rate, and there was a lot of questionable third down plays. It was like 3rd and 6, and Auburn threw the ball away, which is customary to Arkansas fans because we watched Chad Morris play, and I think the defense can definitely capitalize off of the Auburn Tigers and how poor the Chad Morris offense looked like the last few weeks. Now, Auburn hasn't been able to establish any run game, averaging 2.5 yards per carry. Tank Bigsby being their leading carry, he has 14 carries for 46 yards. And they have a pretty open backfield because starting running back Sean Shivers has been hurt since week 1, which would make sense why you're not having a great run game. But Chad Morris just systematically does not run the ball as much as he passes the ball. So it explains why they have a low amount of running yards. Even if they have that starting running back, I don't think it would be much higher. That Auburn running game is averaging 65 yards per game, struggling quite a bit without their starting running back. So if the starting running back does not play, I definitely think it's a situation where the Arkansas defense is going to be able to focus on passing more, just because we've looked pretty good against the run against the Mississippi State backup guys after Kylan Hill got hurt. And then we also looked pretty good against Zamir White, who ran for 169 yards against this Auburn Tigers defense. Seth Williams, though, is a monster, arguably the best, if not one of the best wide receivers in college football. And I watched that Kentucky game a lot before Arkansas, the week 1 game, and Seth Williams had 2 amazing catches, one of them being a touchdown. And overall, Seth Williams is a monster, but they cannot get him going against Georgia. It's definitely be a struggle for the defense. However, I would not let anything out of reach for Barry Odom. He's definitely going to have a game plan to stop Seth Williams. Seth Williams is 6'3", and just overall a really athletic guy who's going to give Arkansas some problems. He has 19 catches, 146 yards, and 2 touchdowns on the season. However, he struggled against Georgia, like I was saying. But wide receiver Anthony Schwartz also looks pretty good. So that's 2 solid guys that the Arkansas defense is going to have to deal with all day on Saturday. The Auburn pass defense is overall pretty good, averaging 239.5 yards on passing defense. They have a pretty good secondary. Defensive back Jamie Sherwood and defensive back Jordan Peters are 2 guys who probably match up against Warren and probably Burks if Burks plays. and those defensive backs are very talented. It's going to be hard to get wide receiver separation off of those top wide receivers, but our wide receiver room is pretty open, so I would expect either Woods or Knox to step up. I just feel like every week we're going to have a new guy. Burks was week 1, Warren was week 2. We'll have